Niels Lhyne, Chapter 2. In a way, the child brought the parents together again. Over his little cradle they would meet in a common hope, a common joy, and a common fear. Of him they would think, and of him they would talk, each as often and as readily as the other, and each was grateful to the other for the child and for all the happiness and love he brought. Yet they were still far apart. Lhyne was quite absorbed in his farming and the affairs of the parish. Not that he took the position of a leader or even of a reformer, but he gave scrupulous attention to the existing order of things, looked on as an interested spectator, and carried out the cautious improvements recommended, after deliberate, very deliberate, consideration by his old head servants or the elders of the parish. It never occurred to him to make any use of the knowledge he had acquired in earlier days. He had too little faith in what he called theories and far too great respect for the time-hallowed, venerable dogmas of experience which other people call practical. In fact, there was nothing about him to indicate that he had not lived there and thus lived all his life, except one little trait. He had a habit of sitting for half hours at a time, quite motionless, on the stile or a boundary stone, looking out over the luscious green rye or the golden top-heavy oats in a strange vegetative trance. This was of the old Lhyne, the young Lhyne. Lhyne, in her world, was by no means so ready to adapt herself quickly and with a good grace. No, she first had to voice her sorrow through the verses of 100 poets, lamenting, in all the broad generalities of the period, the thousands of barriers and fetters that oppress humanity. Sometimes her laments would be clothed in lofty indignation, flinging its wordy froth against the thrones of emperors and the dungeons of tyrants. Sometimes it would take form of a calm, pitying sorrow, looking on as the effulgent lights of beauty faded from a blind and slavish generation, cowed and broken by the soulless bustle of the day. Then again it would appear only as a gentle sigh for the freedom of the bird in its flight and of the cloud drifting lightly into the distance. At last she grew tired of lamenting, and the impotence of her grief goaded in her into doubt and bitterness. Like worshippers who beat their saint and tread him underfoot when he refuses to show his power, she would scoff at the romance she once idolized, and scornfully ask herself whether she did not expect the bird rock to appear presently in the cucumber bed, or Aladdin's cave to open under the floor of the milk cellar. She would answer herself in a sort of childish cynicism, pretending that the world was excessively prosaic, calling the moon green cheese and the roses potpourri, all with the sense of taking revenge and at the same time with a half uneasy, half fascinated feeling that she was committing blasphemy. These attempts at setting herself free were futile. She sank back into the dreams of her girlhood, but with the difference that now they were no longer illuminated by hope. Moreover, she had learned that they were only dreams, distant, elusive dreams, which no longing in the world could ever draw down to her earth. When she abandoned herself to them now, it was with a sense of weariness, while an accusing inner voice told her that she was like the drunkard who knows that his passion is destroying him, that every debauch means strength taken from his weakness and added to the power of his desire. But the voice sounded in vain, for a life soberly lived, without the fair vice of dreams, was no life at all. Life had exactly the value that dreams gave it and no more. So widely different, then, were Niels Lhyne's father and mother, the two friendly powers that struggled unconsciously for mastery over his young soul from the moment the first gleam of intelligence in him gave them something to work on. As the child grew older, the struggle became more intense and was waged with a greater variety of weapons. The faculty in the boy through which the mother tried to influence him was his imagination. He had plenty of imagination, But even when he was a very small boy, it was evident that he felt a great difference between the fairy world his mother's words conjured up and the world that really existed. Often his mother would tell him stories and describe the woeful plight of the hero, until Niles could not see any way out of this trouble, and could not understand how the misery closing like an impenetrable wall tighter and tighter around him and the hero could be overcome. Then it happened more than 11 times that he would suddenly press his cheek against his mother's and whisper, with eyes full of tears and lips trembling, "But it isn't really true." And when he had received the comforting answer he wanted, he would heave a deep sigh of relief and settle down contentedly to listen to the end. His mother did not quite like this defection. When he grew too old for fairy tales, and she tired of inventing them, she would tell him, with some embroideries of her own, about the heroes of war and peace, choosing them that lent themselves to pointing a moral about the power dwelling in a human soul, when it wills one thing only, and neither allows itself to be discouraged by the short-sighted doubts of the moment, nor to be enticed into a soft, enervating peace. All her stories went to this tune, and when history had no more heroes that suited her, she chose an imaginary hero, one whose deeds and fates she could shape as she pleased, a hero after her own heart, spirit of her spirit, flesh of her flesh, and blood of hers too. A few years after Niles was born, she had brought forth a stillborn boy-child, and him she chose. All that he might have been and done she served up before his brother in a confused melody of Promethean longings, messianic courage, and Herculean might, with a naive travesty, a monstrous distortion, a world of cheap fantasies, having no more body of reality than had the tiny little skeleton mouldering in the earth of Longbourn graveyard. Niles was not deceived about the moral of all these tales. He realized perfectly that it was contemptible to be like ordinary people, and he was quite ready to submit to the hard fates that belonged to heroes. In imagination he willingly suffered the wearisome struggles, the ill fortune, the martyrdom of being misjudged, and the victories without peace. But at the same time he felt a wondrous relief in thinking that it was so far away, that nothing of all this would happen before he was grown up. As the dream figures and dream tones of night may walk abroad in the wakeful day like vapory foams, mere shadows of sound, calling on thought and holding it for a fleeting second, as it listens and wonders whether anyone really called, so the images of that dream-born future whisper softly through Niles Luna's childhood, reminding him gently but ceaselessly of the fact that there was a limit set to this happy time, and that presently, one day, it would be no more. This consciousness roused in him a craving to enjoy his childhood to the full, to suck it up through every sense, not to spill a drop, not a single one. Therefore his play had an intensity, sometimes lashed into a passion, under the pressure of an uneasy sense that time was flowing away from him before he could gather from its treasure-laden waters all they brought, as one wave broke upon another. He would sometimes throw himself down on the ground and sob with despair when the holiday hung heavy on his hands for the lack of one thing or another, playmates, inventiveness, or fair weather, and he hated to go to bed because sleep was empty of events and devoid of sensation. Yet it was not always so. It would sometimes happen that he grew weary, and his imagination ran out of colors. Then he would be quite wretched and feel that he was too small and insignificant for these ambitious dreams. He seemed to himself a mean liar, who had brazenly pretended to love and understand what was great, though, if the truth were told, he cared only for the petty, loved only the commonplace, and carried all low-born wishes and desires fully alive within him. Sometimes he would even feel that he had the class hatred of the rabble against everything exalted, and that he would joyfully have helped to stone these heroes who were of a better blood than he and knew that they were. On such days, he would shun his mother, and with a sense of following an ignoble instinct, would seek his father, turning a willing ear and receptive mind to the latter's earth-bound thoughts and matter-of-fact explanations. He felt at home with his father and rejoiced in the likeness between them, well nigh forgetting that it was the same father whom he was wont to look down upon with pity from the pinnacles of his dream castle. Of course, this was not present in his childish mind with the clearness and definiteness given it by the spoken word, but it was all there, though unformed, unborn, in a vague and intangible embryo form. It was like the curious vegetation at the bottom of the sea when seen through layers of ice. Break the ice, or draw that which lives in the dimness out into the full light of speech. What happens is the same. That which is now seen and now grasped is not, in its clearness, the shadowy thing that was.